You know what is one of the perks of internet? Once you've got something out there, it stays public forever. Well, no, that's actually not a perk. Because the problem is that whatever you say can come back from the past to hit you in the face, such as Prince Andrew's interview after he reached a settlement with Virginia Giuffre.
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
You don't remember meeting her?
No, didn't happen.
Welcome back, my Bottle Language buddies. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Bottle Language guy, and it would be great if you join us by just liking this video, subscribing, and hitting that bell. Let's get down to it. This is the question that the interviewer, Emily Mathis, asked about reaching this settlement. If you don't know this woman, if he said back in 2019 that he never met her, if you have no recollection of her whatsoever, then why reach a settlement with her? That's when you notice that he has doubts about his own denial of ever meeting Virginia Giuffre.
Do you remember her?
No. I have no recollection of ever meeting her. I'm almost, in fact, I'm convinced that I was never in trance with her.
Now, to be fair, it's really common that when a person is trying to convince others of his innocence, he can become nervous. It can happen to anyone since we are trying to find a way to be understood and believed. This common mistake has a name, the Othello error, which occurs when the lie catcher fails to consider that a truthful person who is under stress may appear to be lying. The term was originally used in the book Telling Lies by Paul Ekman, whose real-life work was the inspiration of the show Lie to Me. I remember the first analysis I made about Prince Andrew's interview, and of course, I was very aware that in the court of public opinion, this error can occur quite frequently. You haven't heard the whole statement of the person, or the person hasn't even started to speak, and you've already established their guilt for some kind of hunch or feeling you have. Now, having said that, there are signals that are not consistent with people that are telling the truth. And in that last clip, there was such a clue, but it was not about his body language, but more about what he said. This time, pay close attention to the words that come out of his mouth.
Do you remember her?
No. I have no recollection of ever meeting her. I'm almost, in fact, I'm convinced that I was never in trance with her.
There are three things that happened here. The first clue that you should always be looking for is when people offer explanations that are really not needed. This can also be seen as an overcomplicated answer, like, I have no recollection of ever meeting her. Now, I know there are jokes about how the British speak, but I like to think that those are just that, jokes. Because almost every culture and language on Earth is based on the premise of efficiency, even if there are some languages more complicated than others. But wouldn't it be enough to just say, I don't know her, period? This is when you realize that he was absolutely not prepared for this interview. Just because he knew that he couldn't say that he did know her, because it would have raised even more questions. So if he was telling the truth and he wants to be adamant about it, why couldn't he just say, I don't know her? Like, I couldn't have done anything that you're saying because I just don't know this woman. And the interview would have lasted like 5 minutes. When a statement is final, like, I don't know her, or I just couldn't possibly be there because I was somewhere else, or I didn't do it, you're not gonna decorate the statement. If someone says, I didn't do it, and they are telling the truth, they will be aware that the next thing they're going to be asked is about their alibi, anything to prove that they are telling the truth. But repeating the same words in a complicated or flamboyant pronunciation is just making time for something. The brain wants to time out so it can prepare for the next question. Worst case scenario is that you're innocent but don't have an alibi. That's one of the things that is so confusing about Prince Andrew accepting to give this interview. He knew in advance what the interview was about. He knew the topics that were going to be discussed. It seriously makes you wonder if he was making things up on the fly. I don't mean straight up lying. I mean trying to hide certain details in his answers so he could just say a bit of his involvement, but not all of his involvement. This kind of answers are like, I am telling the truth about this, but I don't want you to ask further questions about that. So the interviewer could have been asking him about topic A, And he could be answering topic A truthfully, but he really did not want the branching topic B to arise. It's like a kid playing with a baseball bat and he breaks a window, but the ball also goes inside and breaks a TV. When you confront the child, he says, "Well, yes, I broke the window," but he makes sure not to mention the TV, and if the TV topic arises, he makes sure to go back to the window issue. Because when you tell the honest, complete, plain truth, your brain works in a more streamlined way. Of course, you can have memory bumps here and there, but the process of recalling what actually happened and then saying it is much more simple. There is one interesting point though. That is when telling the truth implies, as in the example of the child, another issue that has not been discussed and you don't want it to arise. That's when your brain really has to work to find the exact words and sentences and angles to satisfy the other person, but without implicating anything else. Basically, telling a half truth is harder for our brains than telling a complete lie. So we'd like to think that this was Andrew's case, but his body language and demeanor has too many inconsistencies to be just a problem of memory and recalling information. Again, he knew what the topic of the interview was about, and most probably he would have prepared, at least inside his mind, for the questions. But then, if he didn't know Virginia at all, then why settle out of court? You don't know this woman, but you agreed to pay a sum that you don't have to avoid going to trial where you can prove your innocence? Well, that's odd. The other part of this answer is when he says, I'm convinced that I was never entranced with her.
I'm convinced that I was never in trance with her.
There's doubt, there's stuttering. He doesn't look convinced of what he's saying, and what's more, he's overcomplicating the answer again. If you don't know the person, if you have never met them, then you can't possibly have been with them in trance, or Paris, or Hong Kong, or anything. You should always be suspicious of any kind of answer that gets too complicated in the affirmation of innocence. The problem with Prince Andrew is that the fact that he accepted to do this interview is because he considered that he had something to say about the whole Epstein affair. You'll agree with me that in a parallel universe he would have accepted the suggestion of his advisors and not make this interview. Imagine that this interview did not exist. Since we delete all this stuttering and insecurity and nervous answers from our perception of Prince Andrew, he could be in better standing now in the public opinion's perception. But he did the interview and claimed that he did not know her, and everything points that, at the very least, they met, because he never denied that categorically. I don't know which one was the greatest mistake, if doing the interview or refusing to go to trial. Maybe both. But as we have seen in so many examples with any numbers of celebrities, it all boils down to who you hang out with. Because you cannot escape the fact that people tend to associate with other persons of similar interests or personality traits. Make of that what you will. If you want to refine your observation skills, all you have to do is download my 100 body language tips right in the description of this video. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas, and it will always be a pleasure, my body language buddies. Much love and bliss.